I am Bobby, and welcome to my castle. Alrighty, it's sundown, and I always wake up like that. Using the DVD scene selection, I'm doing a scene-by-scene review of my favorite movie, the 1931 version of Dracula. And tonight, I'm talking about one of my favorite parts. Scene 3, The Castle. In this scene, the sun has just gone down, and Dracula has risen from his coffin. And at the Borgo Pass Road, he has disguised himself as the carriage driver, picks up Renfield, and takes him to the castle. Behind the camera, the two men most important to Dracula was the director Tod Browning and the cinematographer Karl Freund. Tod Browning was fascinated by the bizarre, and him and his collaborator, the actor Lon Chaney, had wanted to make Dracula for years. But when Lon died, Tod Browning embraced Bale Lugosi's casting, and he even had a personal connection to this scene, where the vampires come out of their graves. Before he went into filmmaking, Tod Browning worked at the circus, and while he was with a Carnival River show, he played the part of a hypnotic living corpse, where he would be supposedly hypnotized, this is a circus so who knows, and then put in the coffin and buried alive. Now they had this tube that the people could watch him through, and it also supplied him with air, but he would be in there from Friday to Sunday. He told the newspapers that the sound of the dirt coming down gave him the shivers, but eventually he almost liked the confinement. Along with having the Edgar Allan Poe of the cinema as the director, Dracula also had one of film history's most highly regarded cinematographers, Karl Freund. Freund innovated the Unchained Camera technique, where you were able to physically move the camera, which allowed for tracking shots, crane shots, tilts, and pans. In this scene, Karl Freund does a couple of tracking shots where the camera is physically moved closer, which is what I tried to simulate in the beginning of the video. And they're always so well done, because they're being done by the master. On Dracula, he would also aim 2 pencil spotlights at Bale's eyes to create this eerie effect. Now there is some debate on who was more in control on the set. David Manners, who played John Harker, died when he was 98, so he was able to be interviewed. And he didn't remember who directed Dracula, but he remembered getting instructions from Karl Freund. But Bela Lugosi, who had played Dracula on Broadway, said he worked very deeply with Tod Browning in toning down his performance from stage to screen, where you have to be more subtle. We'll probably never know the real answer, but I think this scene reflects both of them. Dracula is such an influential film, and according to film historian Bob Madison, almost all of the horror iconography, including stuff that kids think of when they think of horror, comes from Dracula. We have already seen scared villagers giving a warning, which influenced the haunting in Friday the 13th. But this scene begins with Dracula's castle, and it is the classic scary castle. It's medieval, it's built on a huge mountain, and surrounded by a dark sky. It is so ominous and foreboding. And then we go inside to the castle's cellars, where the atmosphere is weird and macabre. Set designer Charles D. Hall took inspiration from the artwork of Gustave Doré. There's dirt, slime, smoke, and of course, coffins. I know, they don't make basements like they used to. And Karl Freund does this tracking shot towards Dracula's coffin, getting closer and closer. And then Dracula's hand comes out. And Bela Lugosi had this signature eerie way of moving his fingers. It reminds me of the way a spider moves its legs. And then, all the children of the night, these creepy looking nocturnal creatures, start to come out. There's possums, Dracula's brides, and this bug that seems to come out of a miniature coffin. Even Dracula historian Gary Rhodes is stumped by this bug. It could be a little coffin, but it could also be a decoration or a snuff box, which would make more sense. But don't let it bug you, because regardless of what it really is, I guarantee you that Todd Browning, with his strange imagination, had to have known what it looked like. And I would relate it to the flashes of the white face in The Exorcist. It's not logical, but it unsettles the audience. And a bug coming out of a little coffin might not make sense, but it certainly adds to that creepy, weird atmosphere. Later, we'll also see armadillos, which are from Texas, not Transylvania, but they also add another element of the bizarre. Then, after being plunged into this weird world and seeing one bizarre creature after the other, we finally see the ultimate creature of the night. Bale Lugosi as Count Dracula, and Karl Freund does a tracking shot towards him. Look at the intensity in Bale's eyes. It's as if you're being hypnotized to come to him. The idea of Dracula being a master hypnotist really comes from the play that was first done in England and then on Broadway. But with Bale Lugosi's death stare, it is so believable. So much so that it really became a signature of his that he would do in other horror roles. Now, part of it was Bale's own angry glare that he would do in real life. Like his son remembers getting this look when he would misbehave. But Bale also enhances it by never blinking throughout the whole movie. So that concentration that controls you never breaks. Years later, Anthony Hopkins would do a similar technique when playing Dr. Hannibal Lecter in Silence of the Lambs. Then he climbs up the stairs and it's the same thing. No blinking, no moving his head, no emotion. Dracula has been doing this for hundreds of years. This is a ritual. He is the living dead. Then the scene shifts to the Borgo Pass Road, where Dracula's carriage is waiting for Renfield. The real Borgo Pass, which is actually named Tehuta Pass, is green and beautiful. But this is Universal's Transylvania, and this Borgo Pass is so haunting. It's filled with fog, and there's this leafless, crooked tree. Dracula is dressed in all black, and is disguised as the driver. Now, I know you can still recognize him, but every time you see his face, he looks so evil and spooky that when I'm watching it, I never question it. Like how I don't question Superman's glasses. The design of the carriage matches his personality too. It's black with black horses, and it has the Dracula family crest painted on it. It's black and white, but I imagine it to be gold, just like his medallion. After being quickly dropped off, Renfield gets into Dracula's carriage, and his real-life nightmare begins. The coach from Count Dracula? Hey, driver! Driver, what do you mean by going at this? In the book, Dracula is driving the carriage really fast. There are these blue flames, and a pack of wolves surround the carriage. Now, in 1930, that would have been kind of tricky to film, especially to have it look good. So instead, they do what they knew how to do. Off camera, Dracula has turned into a bat, and in his bat form, he is leading the carriage to the castle. It's more simple, but it's still creative and groovy to look at. And it accomplishes the same thing. It makes the carriage ride more spooky, and it shows off some of Dracula's supernatural powers. Now, I'll be discussing more of it as we go along, but in 1930, they weren't able to dub movies, so they actually made a second version of Dracula in Spanish. They try to do the flames, but it honestly looks like ordinary fire, so it doesn't really suggest the supernatural, and it isn't as memorable as the bat. In 1931, especially if you lived far from a big city, not all theaters were equipped for sound yet. So Dracula was also released in a silent film version, where they added title cards. It's never been released on home video, but I can imagine this scene being especially effective as a silent movie scene, because so much of what's creepy is visual. The sets, the camera movements, and even the lighting, the way they use lights and darks. It's black and white at its best. And you don't need dialogue to understand the emotion. You can see the evil in Dracula's face. And the terror and apprehension in Ranfield's face. Despite this, though, the way they use sound in the scene is actually really eerie. Ranfield has a couple of lines, but it's mostly no dialogue. There's no music. All you hear are the natural sounds, like the possums scurrying around, the wolves howling, and the sound of the carriage going fast. So every sight and every sound is spooky. Well, time to go back to the coffin. We have just talked about the haunting introduction of one of the most famous faces in horror. Next time, we'll be discussing his equally famous voice. In Scene 4, I am Dracula.